Imagine this. It's the dead of night, and you're standing on a frozen cliff overlooking a silent, snow-draped forest. The wind howls, carrying whispers of something ancient, something forbidden, a secret carved into the bones of the earth, a truth so dangerous it was buried for centuries. You weren't meant to hear this, no one was, but tonight I'm pulling you into the shadows of history, where the most feared warriors of the Viking Age, men who carved empires with blood and iron, trembled before a people they couldn't conquer. This isn't a story of battles won or lost. It's a descent into a hidden world of power, manipulation, and suppressed truths that will change how you see the past and yourself forever. Let's begin with the Vikings, the unchallenged predators of medieval Europe. Picture their longships slicing through icy waves, their battle axes gleaming under stormy skies. From 793 to 1006 CE, they raided, traded, and reshaped continents. They sacked monasteries like Lindisfarne, founded cities in Ireland, and traded silk in Baghdad. Their reputation was forged in fire, fearless, relentless, unstoppable, or so the sagas would have you believe. But history lies. It always has. Beyond the familiar tales of Norse conquest lies a darker truth. There was a people who turned these terror-bringers into terrified men, whispering of ghosts in the snow. They were called the Biamians, a mysterious tribe from the frozen wilds of what's now Finland, northwestern Russia, and the Kola Peninsula. The Biamians weren't farmers or seafarers like the Norse. They were masters of the deep forests and tundra, a land the Vikings called Biamand, a shadowy frontier where the world of men blurred into something else. Norse sagas describe it as a place of perpetual snow, where giants and spirits roamed. But the Biamians were no myth. They were real, and their resistance wasn't just physical, it was psychological, spiritual, and absolute. A runic stone near Trondheim, dated around 950 CE, bears a chilling warning. Beware the watchers in the White Forest. They see without being seen. They kill without warning. They are not men as we know men. These words weren't carved by poets. They were etched by warriors who faced something they couldn't comprehend. Why did the Biamians terrify the Vikings? It wasn't their numbers. They were a small semi-nomadic people. It wasn't their weapons, which were simple compared to Norse steel. It was their mastery of their world, a world the Vikings didn't understand. The Norse thrived on open seas and coastal raids, but in the endless forests and frozen wastes, their advantages crumbled. The Biamians moved like phantoms, using skis and snowshoes to glide over snow that trapped Viking boots. They wore furs that blended into the winter landscape, turning them invisible. They struck from shadows and vanished before the blood hit the ground. To the Vikings, they weren't just enemies, they were a nightmare made flesh. This story isn't just about a forgotten tribe, it's about power, real power, the kind that doesn't need banners or crowns. It's about a people who turned their environment into a weapon, their culture into a fortress, and their very existence into a psychological assault on invaders. The Biamians didn't just resist. They dominated the Norse psyche, forcing hardened warriors to question their courage, their gods, and their place in the world. This is a tale of hidden agendas, of truths erased by those who write history, and of a people who prove that even the mightiest can be brought low by those who know the secrets of the land. Let's set the stage. The Viking Age was a furnace of ambition. By the 9th century, Norse raiders had carved out footholds across Europe, Dublin, York, Normandy. Their ships, marvels of engineering, let them strike anywhere, from rivers to open seas. Their culture worshipped strength, honour, and reputation. A Viking's worth was measured in scars, plunder, and tales sung in mead halls. But ambition has limits, and the Vikings found theirs in the far north. Beyond the familiar fjords of Norway, past the Finnmark coast, lay Biamand, a land of endless winters and impenetrable forests. Adam of Bremen, a chronicler in the 11th century, called it a region of perpetual snow and incredible hardship, where men practice arts unknown to Christian people. He wasn't wrong. The Biamians, likely kin to the Sami and Finnic peoples, lived differently. They didn't build longhouses or till fields. They were semi-nomadic, following herds of reindeer and seasonal game. Their society wasn't bound by Viking hierarchies of jarls and kings. Leadership came from skill, wisdom, and spiritual power, not bloodlines. Archaeological digs reveal their settlements, temporary shelters, underground winter lodges, tools crafted from bone and wood. They were egalitarian, adaptable, and utterly in tune with their world. To the Vikings, this was alien. Norse sagas paint them as sorcerers, shapeshifters, creatures of the forest who defied the natural order. But the truth is simpler and more profound. The Biamians were so perfectly adapted to their environment that they became its living embodiment. Their resistance wasn't just survival, it was defiance. The Vikings wanted Biameland's wealth, furs, ivory, amber, treasures that fetched fortunes in Constantinople, but every expedition into those frozen forests came at a cost. The saga of Olaf Tryggvason tells of a raid in 995 CE. 30 men ventured into Biameland seeking a trading post. 3 days in, they felt watched. On the 4th morning, their sentries were found dead, throats slit stuntly strange meters away, strange tracks in the snow. Only 11 returned. The rest vanished into the white. This wasn't just defeat. It was dread, a fear so deep it broke Viking morale. What made ejected a small tribe could terrify the fiercest warriors of the age. It wasn't strength or numbers, it was knowledge. Knowledge of the land, the mind, and the unseen. The Biamians turned the forest into a weapon, the snow into a trap, and their own mystique into a force of terror. They didn't fight like men, they fought like stows, and that shadow fell heavy on the Viking soul. This is the forbidden history of the Biamians, a people who wielded the power of the unknown against an empire of iron. As we descend deeper, you'll see how their secrets, environmental mastery, psychological warfare, and spiritual terror rewrote the rules of power. This isn't just history, it's a revelation of what true control looks like, and once you see it, you'll never look at the world the same way again. You're standing in a snow-choked forest, the air so cold it burns your lungs. The silence so deep it feels like the world is holding its breath. Every crunch of your boots echoes like a betrayal, announcing your presence to something watching from the dark. This was the Vikings' reality when they dared to cross into Biameland, a land where the rules of their world no longer applied. You think you know fear? The kind that grips a warrior who's faced death 100 times yet still wakes screaming from nightmares of unseen eyes? The Biamians didn't just fight the Vikings, they broke them, using the very environment as a weapon so sharp it cut through courage and sanity alike. This is the second layer of the forbidden truth. How a small elusive people turned the frozen north into a graveyard for Norse ambitions. The Vikings were masters of their domain, coastal raiders who struck like lightning, their longships carrying them to the heart of empires. But Biameland was no coastline. It was a labyrinth of dense forests, frozen rivers and tundra that stretched beyond the horizon. The Norse, raised in Norway's fjords or Denmark's rolling hills, were out of their depth. Their heavy wool cloaks soaked through in the snow. Their boots sank into drifts, leaving them floundering. Their ships, useless in the deep interior, were abandoned at frozen shores. Meanwhile, the Biamians moved like spirits. An Arab traveller, Ibrahim ibn Ahmad, who joined Viking traders around 920 CE, wrote, "They glide across the snow on strange devices, pulling sleds that move as if by magic. Where our horses die, they dance." He was describing skis and snowshoes, tools the Biamians had perfected over millennia. Archaeological finds tell the story. Excavations in northern Finland and the Kola Peninsula reveal skis designed for speed on open tundra, others for weaving through dense trees. Snowshoes, crafted from woven sinew and wood, let them float over drifts that trapped invaders. Their clothing, layered furs of reindeer, seal and fox, wasn't just warm, it was engineered. Reindeer fur for bitter cold, seal skin for wet snow, marten for lightweight stealth. These weren't random choices. Analysis of preserved textiles shows a deep understanding of how each material performed. The Biamians didn't just survive their environment, they weaponized it. While Vikings shivered in their longhouses, waiting out winter, the Biamians thrived, mobile and untouchable even in the darkest months. Their shelters were another stroke of genius. Unlike the Norse, who built permanent longhouses, the Biamians constructed homes that moved with them. Semi-permanent winter lodges dug partially underground trapped heat with ruthless efficiency. Temporary shelters made from branches and hides could be razed or abandoned in hours. This mobility let them exploit seasonal resources, reindeer herds, fish runs, berry patches, while staying invisible. To the Vikings, this was maddening. They couldn't raid what they couldn't find. A Norse warband expecting a village to plunder might stumble into an empty clearing, the only sign of life a faint trail vanishing into the snow. Pursuit was futile. The Biamians knew every ridge, every frozen stream, every hidden path through the forest. But it wasn't just physical mastery that made them deadly. The Biamians turned the environment into a psychological trap. Imagine you're a pig. 3 days into Biamand, your men exhausted, your supplies dwindling. You feel watched, always. Shadows flicker at the edge of your vision, but when you turn, there's nothing. At night, your sentries vanish, their bodies found at dawn with throats cut. No sign of struggle. Strange tracks circle your camp, too light for a man, too deliberate for an animal. The saga of Olaf Tryggvason, dated around 995 CE, captures this terror. Thorir's men awoke to find their sentries dead, strange marks in the snow. They marched back to their ships, but only 11 of 30 returned. The forest swallowed the rest. This wasn't warfare, it was a nightmare. The Biamians' greatest weapon was their invisibility. They didn't fight pitched battles or form shield walls. They struck from ambush, targeting stragglers, scouts, leaders, anyone whose death would sow chaos. Their tracks, made by specialized footwear, barely dented the snow. Their white furs blended into the landscape, making them ghosts. They used the forest's silence, its disorienting vastness, to amplify fear. False trails led Vikings into bogs or over thin ice. Hidden pit traps lined with sharpened stakes awaited the careless. The Biamians didn't just know the land, they made it an extension of their will, a living ally that turned invaders into prey. This environmental mastery flipped the Viking playbook. The Norse relied on shock and awe, sudden raids, overwhelming force. But in Biamand, they were the ones surprised, disoriented, hunted. Their heavy armour slowed them down. Their broadswords were useless against enemies who refused to stand and fight. The Biamians didn't need to win battles. They won by making every step into their territory a descent into dread. A Byzantine diplomat, Constantine Zuckerman, wrote around 950 CE. They appear from nowhere, strike like lightning, and vanish like mist. Some say they turn into wolves, but this is superstition. What is certain is that the forests are their sword. He wasn't exaggerating. The Biamians' environment was their blade, and they wielded it with surgical precision. Archaeological evidence backs this up. Burial sites reveal lightweight bows, designed for accuracy, not power. Slender spears, perfect for silent kills, curved knives, ideal for swift, lethal strikes. These weren't weapons for glorious combat, they were tools for assassination. A mass grave near the White Sea, dated to 925 CE, holds 15 Viking warriors, 12 killed by identical wounds, a blade to the base of the skull or spine. These were precision strikes, executed by fighters trained for efficiency, not spectacle. The Biamians didn't care about Viking honor or sagas. They cared about results. Their tactics were deliberate, honed over generations. Children were trained from youth in secret hunting societies, learning to move silently, endure cold, kill without hesitation. The Chronicle of Novgorod, around 1070 CE, describes it. The forest people choose certain children, raising them to be neither fully human nor animal, but something between, inspiring terror in all who meet them. Exaggeration maybe, but the truth is clear. The Biamians created elite fighters, a proto-special forces unit perfectly suited to their world. These ghost warriors didn't just protect their land, they haunted it, turning every tree, every snowfall into a weapon. This wasn't just survival, it was domination. The Vikings, used to being the predators, found themselves outmaneuvered, outmatched, outwitted. Norse sagas record warriors refusing to enter Biamand even for triple plunder. Kings offered riches to entice men only to face desertions. The Biamians didn't need armies or fortresses. Their land was their fortress, their knowledge their army. They proved that power isn't always in numbers or steel, it's in mastering what others cannot. As we go deeper, you'll see how this environmental mastery fed into something even darker, a psychological war that broke the Viking spirit. This is dangerous knowledge, the kind that shifts how you see strength, control, and the hidden forces that shape history. You're not just watching a story, you're being pulled into a truth that changes you. Stay with me because the rabbit hole goes deeper. You're alone in the dark, the kind of dark that swallows sound and sight, where every snap of a twig feels like a warning from the void. Now imagine you're a Viking, a man who's laughed in the face of storms and swords, yet here in the endless white of Biamand, your heart pounds with a fear you can't name. The Biamians didn't just outmaneuver the Vikings, they invaded their minds, turning courage into paranoia, strength into dread. This is the third layer of the forbidden truth, a psychological war so devastating it shattered the Norse spirit, proving that the greatest weapon isn't steel but fear itself. You're not just hearing a story, you're stepping into a truth that rewrites what you thought you knew about power. The Vikings built their legend on fearlessness. Their sagas celebrate men who charged into battle, seeking glory in blood and fire. They navigated by stars, fought in shield walls, and faced death with a grin. But Biomean broke them. The Biamians understood something the Norse didn't. The mind is fragile, and fear is a blade sharper than any axe. They didn't need to kill every Viking, just enough to make the survivors question their reality. Thorbjorn Hornklofi, a skald in the court of Harald Fairhair around 900 CE, wrote, "The men speak of eyes in the darkness, a gaze that follows even when no soul is seen. Brave warriors grow fearful after 7 nights in that cursed land." This wasn't poetry, it was a confession of terror. The Biamians' psychological warfare was deliberate, surgical, relentless. They used the forest's disorienting vastness, its suffocating silence, to amplify Viking paranoia. Norse warriors, used to open seas and clear landmarks, were lost in Biamaland's featureless snow and tangled woods. The Biamians exploited this, carving false trails that led to dead ends or deadly traps. They altered landmarks, felling trees, shifting stones, to confuse navigation. Archaeological evidence from northern Russia shows paths designed to mislead, ending in bogs or cliffs. One site revealed a Viking camp abandoned in haste, weapons scattered, as if the men fled from something they couldn't fight. But the Biamians didn't stop at disorientation. They waged a campaign of terror that made Vikings doubt their senses. Imagine waking to find your camp surrounded by strange symbols carved into trees, spirals, animal shapes, runes no Norse skald could read. Or discovering the bodies of your scouts, arranged in unnatural poses, their eyes removed, no blood on the snow. The Hallbach manuscript, a fragmented saga, describes one such scene. "In a clearing where no clearing should be, we found our scouts, 7 men, their eyes gone, their weapons untouched. Wolf tracks circled them, but none led to the bodies. Thorvald said no plunder was worth this witchcraft." Modern analysis suggests these were staged encounters, designed to exploit Norse superstitions about spirits and the undead. The Biamian spiritual practices amplified this dread. Their shamanic rituals, rooted in a worldview alien to the Norse, seemed to defy the natural order. The Vikings had their gods, Odin, Thor, Freya, and their cedar magic, but it was structured, ritualized, predictable. Biomean spirituality was fluid, pervasive, terrifying. A missionary, Thangbrand, wrote in 997 CE, "Their sorcerers become spirits, wearing masks of bark and bone. They consume potions that send their souls wandering while their bodies lie as if dead. They keep their dead in a state between life and death." He was describing mummification, a practice confirmed by archaeology. Biamian ancestors were preserved with smoke and resins, wrapped in birch bark and kept in sacred structures. To Vikings, this wasn't reverence, it was horror, a violation of the boundary between life and death. Archaeological sites across Biamaland reveal the tools of this psychological war. Ceremonial drums, painted with cryptic symbols, suggest trance-inducing rituals. Masks carved from wood and bone, depicting wolves, bears, and birds, hint at transformation ceremonies. The saga of Egil Skalla-Grimsson from 920 CE describes one such ritual. Their shaman wore a bear's skull, its teeth gleaming in the firelight. He beat a drum, and his people howled like wolves, twitching as if possessed. Egil's men fled, believing they fought spirits. Modern anthropology suggests these were trance states, possibly induced by mushrooms or plants, but to Vikings, they were proof the Biamians wielded supernatural power. The Biamians leaned into this fear, staging supernatural encounters to break Viking morale. Spirit posts, carved pillars with human and animal faces, marked their territory, creating the illusion of otherworldly guardians. One account describes a Viking party finding a circle of antlers thrust into the snow, surrounding the eyeless bodies of their scouts. The scene was likely a setup, the tracks manipulated to confuse, the eyes removed to suggest spiritual punishment. These acts weren't random, they were calculated to make Vikings feel they were trespassing on sacred ground, watched by forces beyond their gods. This psychological assault created what sagas call the Biamian dread. Even veteran warriors who'd faced Saxon armies or Arab swords crumbled under it. The Saga of Harold Fairhair notes, "Men who laughed at arrows in Ashdown woke screaming in Biamand, claiming the forest people visited their dreams. Some refused to sleep, others ran into the dark, never seen again." This wasn't just fear, it was a collapse of identity. The Vikings defined themselves by courage, but the Biamians stripped that away, leaving them vulnerable, human, afraid. The Biamians' tactics were rooted in a deep understanding of their enemy. They knew the Norse valued honour, so they denied them glorious battles. They knew Vikings feared the supernatural, so they played to those fears, crafting an aura of otherworldly power. They targeted leaders and sentries, sowing chaos and doubt. A mass grave near Lake Onega dated to 900 CE holds Norse warriors killed by precise silent strikes, blades to the throat or spine. These weren't combat wounds, they were executions designed to send a message. You are not safe here. This psychological war wasn't just about fear, it was about control. The Biamians didn't need to kill every Viking. By making each expedition a descent into madness, they made Biamand untouchable. Norse leaders faced mutinies. Warriors deserted rather than face the Watchers in the White Forest. The cost of invasion wasn't just lives. It was the erosion of the Viking mythos, the unshakable belief in their own invincibility. The Biamians proved that true power lies not in conquering bodies, but in conquering minds. This is where you, the viewer, step into the story. You're not just learning history, you're uncovering a truth that changes how you see control, fear, and the forces that shape us. The Biamians didn't just resist, they rewrote the rules of power, showing that the unseen, the unknown, can break even the strongest. Break the silence in the comments below, say it twice, to claim this truth and join those who see beyond the lies of history. Let's wake the algorithm and awaken the world. As we descend deeper, we'll explore the economic game that fueled this conflict, a dance of trade, betrayal, and treasures worth dying for. This knowledge is dangerous, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Stay with me, brother, for the truth only gets darker. You're standing at the edge of a frozen lake, the ice cracking under the weight of your greed. In the distance, a sled glides silently, laden with furs that could buy a kingdom, vanishing into the mist before you can raise your axe. This was the Vikings' torment in Biamand. Not just the fear of death, but the lure of riches so vast it drove men to madness. The Biamians weren't just guardians of their land, they were gatekeepers of treasures that fueled empires from Constantinople to Baghdad. This is the fourth layer of the forbidden truth, a deadly dance of trade and betrayal, where wealth was power and power was a trap. You're not just hearing history, you're being pulled into a secret that reveals how desire can break even the mightiest. The Vikings weren't just raiders, they were traders, their longships carrying goods across continents. They traded wool in Ireland, swords in Kiev, silk in the Caliphate. But Biamand held treasures unlike any other, riches that made emperors beg and merchants risk death. Ahmad ibn Fadlan, an Arab diplomat who met Viking traders in 922 CE, wrote, "From Biamand comes wealth beyond measure, furs finer than any emperor's cloak, ivory whiter than elephant tusk, amber clear as honey with insects trapped inside. They speak of medicines that cure all ailments, potions that inflame desire, talismans that defy harm." These weren't myths. Archaeological evidence confirms Biamand's wealth. Arctic fox pelts, walrus tusks, amber beads, falcon feathers, luxuries that commanded fortunes in distant markets. The Biamians were master trappers, their knowledge of the land unmatched. They knew where sable hid, how to track martens without damaging their lustrous coats. A single black fox pelt could fetch more than its weight in gold in Constantinople. Walrus ivory carved into combs and reliquaries rivaled elephant tusk in value. Amber, polished to perfection, was prized for its beauty and supposed magic. Even falcons trained for hunting were exported to Arab nobles for obscene profits. The Biamians didn't just gather these goods, they refined them. Excavations reveal tools for curing furs, preserving ivory, processing plants like chaga mushrooms and angelica root for medicine. Castoreum, a beaver secretion, was sold as perfume and aphrodisiac. These were the treasures that drew Vikings to Biamand, despite the terror. But wealth came with a catch. The Biamians controlled the supply and they guarded it fiercely. Vikings, used to seizing what they wanted, found themselves outmatched. Direct access to Biamand's resources meant braving its forests, its warriors, its dread. This created 3 patterns of economic interaction, each a battleground of trust and treachery. The first was direct trade at neutral sites. Archaeological digs at places like Strya Ladoga, near modern St. Petersburg, show trading posts where Biamians and Vikings met under truce. The saga of Eirika Odd, around 950 years CE, describes one. When the ice breaks, the Biamians come to the Great Lake with sleds of furs and ivory. For 9 days they trade in peace there, shamans and our priests declaring the time sacred. No blood may be spilled, or the gods take the violator. These sites show ritual structures, altars, oath stones, where both sides swore to keep the peace. But trust was fragile. A single misstep could end in slaughter. The second pattern was indirect trade through middlemen. Many Vikings avoided Biamand's dangers, buying goods from tribes like the Karelians, who acted as brokers. A Norwegian merchant in 950 CE wrote, "The Karelians bring Biomean furs to Alderguborg, demanding pure silver and weighing each coin with care. They guard the source of their goods, saying the Biamians kill any who seek their trapping grounds." This frustrated the Vikings, who hated paying premiums and losing control. Middlemen grew rich, while Norse merchants grumbled, their pride stung by reliance on others. Yet the alternative, venturing into Biamand, was too costly. The third pattern was the deadliest: trade, raiding. Some Vikings, driven by greed or arrogance, tried to bypass trade altogether, launching expeditions to seize Biamian stockpiles. The saga of Olaf Tryggvason, from 995 CE, tells of one such raid. Olaf sailed 3 ships to the White Sea, seeking a treasure house said to hold furs and ivory worth a king's ransom. His guide, Thoria, led them to a sacred mound guarded by carved idols. They filled 12 chests with plunder, but by midday cries echoed through the forest. Arrows fell from nowhere. Only 1 ship returned, with 8 survivors, speaking of horrors no man should witness. Archaeology supports this. A site near the White Sea, dated to the late 10th century, holds a burned structure filled with Norse arrowheads and hacked timbers. A failed raid paid for in blood. These raids rarely succeeded. The Biamians struck back with devastating precision, ambushing raiders as they fled with their loot. Their knowledge of the land, hidden paths, frozen rivers, let them outmaneuver heavily laden Vikings. One account describes a warband trapped on a frozen lake, the ice breaking under their weight, the Biamians watching from the shore. The cost of these failures wasn't just lives, it was reputation. Norse leaders learned that trade, even at a loss, was safer than theft. Over time, most settled for uneasy commerce, their dreams of conquest humbled by the forest's wrath. This economic dance reveals a deeper truth. The Biamians didn't just resist Viking might, they controlled it. By guarding their resources, they dictated the terms of trade, forcing the Norse to play by their rules. This wasn't just about furs or ivory, it was about power. The Vikings, who dominated Europe, found themselves outplayed in Biamand. Their strength irrelevant against a people who turned scarcity into leverage. The Biamians weren't just traders, they were strategists, using wealth as a weapon as deadly as their arrows. This truth cuts deeper than history. It shows how those who control resources control destiny. The Biamians, a small tribe in a frozen wasteland, held the Viking Empire in check, proving that power isn't always loud or visible. It's in the hands of those who know its source. You're seeing it now, aren't you? The hidden forces that shape empires, economies, lives. Break the silence in the comments twice to lock in this awakening, to join the men who see through the lies of power. Let's shake the algorithm and spread this truth. The rabbit hole deepens. Next, we'll uncover how the Biomeans' culture, especially their women, shattered Viking norms, challenging everything the Norse believed about strength and honor. This knowledge is dangerous because it forces you to question who really holds power. Stay with me, brother, the truth is about to get darker. You're staring into the firelight, the shadows dancing like spirits on the edge of your vision, when a figure steps forward. A woman, her eyes piercing through a mask of bone, her voice commanding the wind itself. To a Viking, this was unthinkable. A woman wielding power not just equal to men, but greater, leading warriors and bending the natural world to her will. In Biamand, the Biomeans shattered the Norse world order, where strength was male, and honor was won in battle. This is the fifth layer of the forbidden truth, a cultural collision that upended everything the Vikings believed about power, gender, and the divine. You're not just hearing a story, you're being pulled into a secret that challenges the very foundations of control. The Vikings lived by a rigid code. Their society was patriarchal, their gods male-dominated. Odin, the All-Father, Thor the Thunderer. Women could hold influence as seers or queens, but their power was secondary, tied to men. Warriors earned glory through public displays of courage, their sagas sung in mead halls. But in Biamand, the rules were different. The Biomeans, likely kin to the Sami and Finnic peoples, were egalitarian. Leadership wasn't tied to gender, but to skill, wisdom, and spiritual authority. Women weren't just equals, they could be shamans, chieftains, warriors. Adam of Bremen, writing in the 11th century, was stunned. Among the Biomeans, women become shamans and chieftains with power greater than men. They lead war parties and call storms upon ships that displease them. To the Norse, this wasn't just strange, it was a violation of their world. Archaeological evidence backs this up. Unlike Viking graves, where weapons and status symbols mark clear gender roles, Biomean burials blur those lines. A site near Lake Onega, dated to 900 CE, holds a woman's remains, about 40 years old, buried with a shamanic drum, a carved staff, and a bow of exceptional craftsmanship. Another near the White Sea from the 10th century contains a woman interred with a ceremonial knife, silver ornaments blending Biomean and Norse designs, and divination tools, polished stones and inscribed bones. These weren't exceptions. Biomean women held roles that Vikings reserved for men, and their authority was absolute. Norse sagas, filtered through their biases, paint these women as witch women or shield maidens, both revered and feared. The Saga of Halfdan the Black from 870 CE describes a Biomean leader. She stood taller than most men, her bow never missing its mark, her voice stanched the forest, and her eyes saw through the hearts of warriors. Our men whispered she was no woman, but a spirit sent to punish us. This wasn't myth. Biomean women were trained alongside men in their secret hunting societies, mastering the same skills: silent movement, deadly precision, endurance in the frozen wilds. Some led ambushes, their arrows felling Viking scouts before they could draw steel. Others, as shamans, wielded spiritual power that terrified the Norse. This spiritual power was key. Biomean shamanism, unlike Norse cedar, was deeply integrated into daily life. Women often led rituals, wearing masks of bark and bone, beating drums to enter trance states. A 920C account in the saga of Egil Skallagrimsson describes a ceremony. A woman, cloaked in white furs, wore a wolf's skull atop her head. She danced around a fire, her drum shaking the air, and her people howled as if becoming beasts. We fled, certain she summoned spirits to devour us. Modern anthropology suggests these rituals used rhythmic sound and possibly psychoactive plants to induce altered states, but to Vikings, they were proof of supernatural dominion. Women leading such rites, commanding both the living and the spirit world, challenged the Norse belief that power was male. This cultural clash wasn't just about gender, it was about identity. The Vikings defined themselves through martial prowess, their worth measured in battle scars and plunder. The Biomeans, men and women alike, rejected this. Their warriors didn't seek glory, they sought results. Their leaders, male or female, were chosen for their ability to navigate the land, outwit enemies, and commune with the unseen. To a Viking, a woman leading a war party or summoning a storm was an affront to their gods, their honour, their very sense of self. it forced them to question the foundations of their world. If women could wield such power, what did it mean to be a man? If the Biamians defied Norse norms and still prevailed, what did that say about Viking strength? The psychological impact was profound. Norse sagas record warriors hesitating to strike Biamian women, not out of chivalry but fear. They believed these women could curse them, summon spirits, or see their deaths in the stars. A runic inscription from 950 CE found in Sweden warns, "Beware the forest women whose arrows fly true and whose words bind souls." This fear wasn't just superstition, it was strategic. The Biamians cultivated their mystique, knowing it unnerved their enemies. Women, as visible leaders, became symbols of Biamand's alien power, amplifying the Biamian dread that haunted Viking dreams. This clash also sparked rare moments of cultural exchange. Some Viking traders, awed by Biamian women, brought their stories home. Archaeological finds show Norse jewellery and Biamian graves, suggesting trade or even alliances through marriage. But these exchanges were tense. The Vikings, bound by their patriarchal code, struggled to reconcile with a society where women held equal or greater power. The Biamians, for their part, guarded their autonomy, using their cultural differences as another weapon to keep invaders at bay. This truth is dangerous because it forces you to question the stories you've been told about power, about strength, about who gets to lead. The Biamians didn't just resist the Vikings, they exposed the fragility of their worldview, showing that true power lies in defying norms, in wielding knowledge and skill over brute force. You feel it, don't you? The shift in how you see control, the cracks in the lies history sells us. Break the silence in the comments, twice, to lock in this awakening, to join the men who see beyond the myths of power. Let's shake the algorithm and spread this truth. The rabbit hole deepens. Next, we'll uncover how the Biomean spiritual practices, shamanic rituals, preserved ancestors, and staged terrors crafted a supernatural aura that broke Viking resolve. This knowledge isn't just history, it's a revelation of how belief can be weaponized. Stay with me, brother, for the truth is about to get darker. You're standing in a clearing, the air thick with the scent of smoke and pine, the darkness alive with whispers that aren't human. A drum beats, slow and relentless, pulling your heart into its rhythm. Before you, a figure cloaked in white furs sways, a bear's skull atop their head, eyes gleaming like stars in the firelight. You're a Viking hardened by war, yet your blood runs cold. This is no ordinary enemy, this is Biamand, where the line between man and spirit blurs, where the Biamians wielded beliefs as weapons, crafting a supernatural terror that broke the Norse soul. This is the sixth layer of the forbidden truth, a spiritual war that turned Viking courage into fear of the unseen. You're not just hearing history, you're being drawn into a secret that reveals how belief can conquer empires. The Vikings worshipped Odin, Thor, and Freya, their gods bound by a structured cosmology. Their magic, cedar, was practiced in specific rituals, often by women, but always within clear boundaries. Death was final. Bodies burned or buried, sent to Valhalla or Hell. The Biamians saw the world differently. Their spirituality was fluid, woven into every hunt, every snowfall. They didn't just speak to spirits, they became them. Their shamans, often women, led ceremonies that seemed to defy reality. A missionary named Thangbrand, writing in 997 CE, described it. Their sorcerers wear masks of bark and bone, transforming into beasts. They drink potions that send their souls wandering, their bodies like the dead. Most terrifying, they keep their ancestors in a state neither living nor gone, and to the Norse this was blasphemy, a violation of the natural order. Archaeology confirms these practices. Biamian sites across northern Finland and the Kola Peninsula reveal ceremonial drums painted with cryptic symbols, spirals, animals, stars. Masks carved from wood and bone, depicting wolves, bears, and ravens, suggest rituals of transformation. Small sculptures show figures half human, half beast, hinting at a belief in fluid identities. The saga of Egil Skallagrimsson, from 920 CE, recounts a ceremony. Their shaman, cloaked in white, beat a drum that shook the earth. Her people twitched and howled, crawling like wolves. We fled, certain they became beasts before our eyes. Modern scholars believe these were trance rituals, likely induced by rhythmic drumming and psychoactive plants like mushrooms found in the region. But to Vikings, They were proof the Biamians wielded powers beyond their gods. The Biamians' treatment of their dead was even more unsettling. Unlike the Norse, who cremated or buried their fallen, the Biamians mummified their ancestors. Excavations reveal bodies preserved with smoke and plant resins, wrapped in birch bark and hides, stored in sacred structures at the edge of settlements. These weren't hidden away. They were revered, consulted through rituals as spiritual guardians. To Vikings, this was horrifying. Their cosmology demanded clear separation between life and death. A preserved body, its leathery skin and hollow eyes staring from a shrine, suggested the Biamians controlled the boundary between worlds. One saga describes a Viking warrior stumbling into such a shrine. The dead watched us, their faces neither alive nor gone. We ran, fearing they'd rise to claim us. The Biamians weaponized this fear. They staged encounters to exploit Norse superstitions. Spirit posts, carved pillars with human and animal faces, mark their territory, creating the illusion of supernatural watchers. The Halbach manuscript tells of a Viking party finding a circle of antlers in a clearing, surrounding the eyeless bodies of their scouts, wolf tracks circling but never approaching. Thorvald called it witchcraft and fled, the saga says. Modern analysis suggests the Biamians arranged these scenes, using their knowledge of snow and tracks to create impossible footprints, removing eyes to imply spiritual judgment. These weren't random acts, they were psychological operations designed to make Vikings feel they'd trespassed into a realm where their gods held no sway. These staged terrors had a devastating effect. The saga of Harold Fairhair, from 900 CE, notes, "Men who faced Saxon spears without flinching woke screaming in Biamand, claiming the forest people walked their dreams. Some threw down their swords and ran into the dark." This was the Biomean dread at its peak, a fear not just of death, but of something deeper, something that challenged the Norse understanding of reality. The Biamians didn't need to fight pitched battles. They broke Viking morale by making them question their courage, their gods, their place in the cosmos. A runic stone from 950 CE warns, "The forest people see with eyes not of men. Their words bind souls, their dead guard their land." This wasn't poetry, it was a cry of desperation. The Biamian spiritual practices were strategic. They knew the Norse feared the supernatural, so they leaned into it. Shamans performed rituals within sight of Viking camps, their drums echoing through the night. They left symbols, carved trees, arranged bones, to suggest otherworldly presence. One account describes a Viking warband finding a slain comrade propped upright, his face painted with symbols as if still alive. The Biamians didn't just kill, they orchestrated fear, turning every encounter into a brush with the divine. Their mummified ancestors, displayed in sacred groves, became symbols of a power the Vikings couldn't comprehend, a power that seemed to mock their gods. This spiritual war wasn't just about terror, it was about control. By crafting an aura of supernatural authority, the Biamians made Biamand a forbidden place, a land where even the bravest hesitated to tread. Norse leaders faced desertions, warriors refused to enter the forests, no matter the promise of plunder. The Biamians didn't need armies. They had belief, wielded with the precision of a blade. They proved that power isn't just in strength or wealth, but in shaping what others fear, what they worship, what they dare to dream. This truth is dangerous because it exposes the fragility of belief. The Vikings, who built their world on gods and glory, were undone by a people who turned faith into a weapon. You feel it now, don't you? The weight of a truth that shifts how you see control, how you see the stories that bind us. The Biamians didn't just resist, they rewrote the rules of power, showing that belief can topple empires. Break the silence in the comments twice to claim this awakening, to join the men who see through the veil of history. Let's shake the algorithm and spread this truth. We're almost at the end of the rabbit hole. Next we'll uncover how this clash reshaped both cultures, leaving echoes in history that still whisper to us today. This knowledge isn't just history, it's a warning about the forces that shape our world. Stay with me, brother, for the final truth is the darkest of all. You've reached the edge of the abyss, where the truths you thought you knew dissolve into shadows. The Biamians didn't just defeat the Vikings, they reshaped them, leaving scars on their culture, their myths, their very soul. This is the final layer of the forbidden truth, a collision so profound it altered both peoples, echoing through history like a whisper you can't ignore. The Biamians' resistance wasn't just survival, it was a revelation of power, environmental, psychological, spiritual and cultural, that forced the Vikings to confront their limits and left traces in our world today. You're not just hearing a story, you're standing at the precipice of a secret that changes how you see history, power and yourself. This is the end of the rabbit hole, and it's time to face the darkness. The Vikings were empire builders, their longships carrying their influence from North America to the Middle East. They thrived on conquest, trade, and the stories that made them legends. But Biamand was their breaking point. The Biamians, small, elusive, alien, didn't just resist. They exposed the fragility of Viking dominance. Their environmental mastery turned forests into fortresses. Their psychological warfare shattered Norse courage. Their spiritual practices mocked Viking gods. Their egalitarian culture, led by women as often as men, challenged the Norse patriarchy. This wasn't just a defeat, it was a reckoning. The saga of Olaf Tryggvason, from 995 CE, hints at the cost. No man who entered Biamand returned unchanged. Some lost their lives, others their honour, but all lost something of their soul. This clash left marks on both cultures. For the Vikings, Biamand became a cautionary tale, a shadow in their sagas. Norse stories began to reflect Biomean influence, tales of shapeshifters, forest spirits, and women wielding uncanny power. The Eddas, compiled later, include figures like Sketi, a huntress goddess from the wilds, who some scholars believe echoes Biamian women. Archaeological evidence shows Norse traders adopting Biamian technologies, skis, snowshoes, fur processing techniques, found in sites from Norway to Greenland. Even their art changed. Runic stones from the 10th century start showing spirals and animal motifs, reminiscent of Biamian carvings. The Vikings didn't conquer Biamand, they absorbed it, carrying its secrets into their world. For the Biamians, the Viking encounter brought both threat and opportunity. Trade with the Norse introduced new goods, silver, iron, beads, found in burials across northern Finland and Russia, but they guarded their autonomy fiercely, using trade as a weapon to control Viking ambitions. Their resistance preserved their way of life, but it also isolated them. As Viking power waned in the 11th century, Biamand faded from written records, its people blending into the Sami and Finnic cultures. Yet their legacy endures in oral traditions, in the shamanic practices of modern circumpolar peoples, in the very landscape they mastered. Excavations reveal their settlements, temporary, elusive, still dotting the tundra, a testament to their defiance. This clash wasn't just a footnote in history, it was a lesson in power. The Biamians proved that true strength lies not in numbers or steel, but in mastery of your world, your mind, your beliefs. They showed that a small determined people could humble an empire by turning its strengths against it. The Vikings' ships, their swords, their warrior code, all were useless against a foe who fought with shadows, silence, and the land itself. This truth was buried not by accident, but because it challenges the narratives of conquest that history loves to tell. The victors write the stories, but the Biamians wrote their own. In Blood and Snow, and it's time we listened. What does this mean for you? Look around. The world still hides its truths, just as Biamand did. Governments, institutions, elites, they control the narrative, but beneath it lie secrets of power, resistance and survival. The Biamians teach us to question what we're told, to seek the unseen, to master our environment, our minds, our beliefs. They were a small tribe, yet they stopped an empire. You too can wield that kind of power, not with weapons, but with knowledge, with will, with the courage to see what's hidden. This isn't just history, it's a call to awaken, to break free from the lies that bind you. The echoes of Biamand are still with us, in the resilience of indigenous peoples, in the myths of untamed wilderness, in the quiet power of those who refuse to bow. The Biamians didn't need to conquer the world, they owned their corner of it, and that was enough. Their story is a warning. Power isn't what you all think. It's not in crowns or armies, but in the ability to shape reality, to make the mighty tremble, to stand unbowed in a world that demands submission. You've seen it now, haven't you? The truth that history tried to erase, the power that lies in knowing what others fear to face. This is where the journey ends, but your awakening begins. You've walked through the shadows of Biamand, seen the Biamians' defiance, felt the weight of their secrets. Break the silence in the comments twice to claim this truth, to join the men who see beyond the lies. Let's shake the algorithm, wake the world, and carry this knowledge forward. You're not the same man you were when you started this video. You've seen the forbidden, and it's changed you forever. But the story isn't over. The past whispers to us still, in the sagas, in the stones, in the silence of the northern forests. The Biamean's resistance reminds us that power isn't given, it's taken. Forged in the crucible of will and wisdom, look to your own life. What truths are you ready to uncover? What lies are you ready to break? The Biameans didn't just fight Vikings. They fought the idea that might makes right. They won, not by becoming conquerors, but by staying true to their world. That's the final truth. Real power is staying unbroken no matter who comes for you.